Now that Thanksgiving is over, if you're anything like my family, you've got a lot of food left over that you need to do something with. And you can only have so many turkey sandwiches. Well, stay tuned because I'm going to show you fellow ham lovers how to turn this into not only one, but two unbelievable meals. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Cooking from Scratch. It's Melissa, and today we are making use of the tons of food that all of us usually have left over from Thanksgiving. Now, normally for Thanksgiving, you have two camps. You have the turkey camp and you have the ham camp. Now, turkey already has an amazing sandwich that they do at the end of every Thanksgiving. But ham rarely gets the chance to shine. Well, today we're going to right that wrong and we're going to turn this leftover, which looks like something a dinosaur spit out, into two unbelievably delicious meals. So what you're going to need first for the sandwich is and then for the soup you're going to need So first, because it's going to take a little bit longer, we're going to start with the soup. And a bone-in ham like this just begs to be put into a nice, warm, creamy bath of split pea soup. Now I know what you're thinking. Yes, peas are still on that list of everyone's most love to hate them vegetables, but I promise you, in a good soup, you will look past the color because the flavor comes out, the texture comes out, and there's ham. I mean, you can't go wrong. Now, because the soup itself is a little on the rich side, we're gonna wanna pair that with a different take on ham that can bring some acidity to the party. It can bring a little bit of sharpness, basically a nice contrast to the soup itself. And for that, we're gonna do a classic sandwich called the Cuban sandwich, or the Cubano. Now, I know what you're thinking, you purists out there. Yes, normally when you make a Cuban sandwich, you actually need two different types of ham. You need your sliced ham, more like your deli ham, and you need shredded ham. However, we just survived Thanksgiving. I don't know how. I'm not making two different kinds of ham, and I know you're not either. This is all about using up what we have left, not adding more that we have to consume. A refrigerator can only hold so much. So, we are just gonna stick with the ham that we already have from Thanksgiving. If you'd like to go the extra mile and make some shredded ham, we will be covering that soon on the channel. Trust me, because shredded pork, especially in a nice Dr. Pepper bath, is heavenly. So for the soup, you're gonna need yourself a nice big Dutch oven stew pot. I like this one because not only is the white really nice to film against, but stuff does not stick to it as much, which is a favorite of mine, and you still get browning. If you guys would like a video talking about kind of like my favorite pans to use that are pretty affordable, let me know in the comments down below. I'd love to do it. So to our stew pot, we're gonna need to add the butter, the carrots, the celery, and the onions, saving the garlic for last. Now, in the original recipe, it asks you to dice up very finely all of the vegetables. Do you know what? No, let's go simple. Let's go very, very simple. Take all those vegetables and stick them into food processor. That's what it's called. I knew if she talked for a bit, it would just eventually come to me. So if you have a food processor, take all of those vegetables, cut them into about bite-sized pieces. Don't go crazy. All you need to do is make sure that you skin the carrots, take the spines out of the celery, take off the skin of the onions, and then stick it in a food processor. And you're gonna want to take it to its finely, finely grated, but it's not mush. If you do not have a food processor, you can do the same thing with just your standard box grater. I don't know why, I'm really talking with my hands today. Now, the reason why I like to go with a nice fine grate for the onions, the carrots, and the celery is because this is eventually going to get blended together, and it helps not only for your blender to do a little less work, but also for you to do a little less work. Because if you have a food processor, just chuck it all in there and let this food processor do the work. The other benefit to this is that it allows the flavors to meld a lot easier because the food is already pretty much broken down. Now, once you've sweated out the vegetables, then you're going to want to add the garlic in at the last bit. Finally, once all that's together, you're going to want to take your bone-in ham, stick it into the pot. Now, I like to get a little bit of browning on the ham and the ham bone before I enter in the liquids because one, it's going to add a little bit more flavor to the party. Two, it'll help get a nice crispiness to the leftover ham. And three, it's going to help to bring out a little bit of that natural gelatin that's going to be left in the ham. This is why animal bones are almost always used in a traditional stock, not broth. Broth is different. We're talking stock here. Because there is connective tissue in here that once you break it down, it takes it from collagen to gelatin, which is that lip-smackiny goodness that you need in not only a good soup, but also a good stew. And Jell-O. But we're not going to talk about Jell-O. Once you've added in your chicken stock and your water, you're going to want to leave that to simmer for a good hour. So let me introduce you to a complete game changer in the kitchen. This is what's known as an Immersion Blender. Now, I haven't worked with this one specifically. This one is actually my mother's. I've used other ones before. Normally you can find them for about $60 to $80 depending on the quality. Not only is it a great replacement for a blender if you don't have room for a blender or a whole bunch of money to sink into a blender, it can do what a blender can do and other things, with the exception of crushing ice. This is one thing, unfortunately, it can't do, so it won't be able to make my pina coladas. All that aside, what it does do, you can stick this into any pot of soup and instantly get it to a nice, smooth texture without having to worry about transferring hot liquid into a blender and back. The mess aside, just think about the risk of hot liquid all over the place. With this, you can also make whipped egg whites for meringues. You can make homemade whipped cream, and it is so much easier to clean than a blender. Now, if you guys would like to see some product reviews on these or some recommendations on ones that you can find in your area, just let me know down below. I love to do those. Okay, so it's been about an hour, so before we can finish this up, we need to take out that ham bone. Oh my god, it smells so good. Unfortunately, color aside, I've not found a good way to be able to make the color less mossy looking. If you guys happen to have any tips and tricks on how you get a split pea soup into a much better color, or just tips on split pea soup in general, please let me know in the comments down below. I love trying out your tips and tricks. This was so not the day to wear a brand new white sweater. I'm trying to keep all the meat connected to the bone because we're gonna blitz this. So before we pick the meat off of that, we need to get this into a nice, smooth, even consistency. So, if this is your first time using a immersion blender, sometimes also known as a stick blender, a couple of handy tips. One, if possible, you can take a paper plate and stick it around this to help kind of keep the splatter down. We're going to test how lucky I am right now with the sweater. Two, make sure the liquid comes over the blade completely. You want to be careful because if it doesn't, you're going to get a lot of splatter coming back. Three, start very, very slowly, and then once things start to get into a more homogenized mixture, then you can put the spurs to it. Ooh. Okay. So I'm going to start mixing below, just nice, even bursts, and then slowly add more power. So our very last step before we are done on the soup is we're going to want to taste and see if we need to correct any of the seasoning. Oh, it's so good. Could use just a pinch more salt, probably a few more cracks of pepper. Why do you do this at the end rather than the beginning? Is because you don't know how much this is going to condense. And you can always add salt, you can never take it away. So what may taste perfect at the beginning may be overly salty at the end. Much better. Finally, the last thing we need to do is just pick off parts from the ham bone, stick it back in the soup. Now, if you don't have much, you can always use the ham that you saved after and just cut it up into pieces and add. It all depends on what's really left on the bone.
Okay, now we can move on to the sandwich. Get yourself just a classic French roll. If you don't have them, you can always use hot dog ones. We don't have to be fancy for this, it's leftovers. Now for preparation, I found it's easier just to split the top from the bottom. Alright, first we're going to start off with some, you can really use any kind of mustard. I decided to go a little bit fancy with this Kraft Ale mustard, but any kind of mustard really will do. For me, I like to spread the mustard on both the top and the bottom part because it acts like a sort of barrier that helps to keep the juices from the meat and the liquid from the cheese from kind of ruining the bread. Just a nice thin layer will do, since we're putting this on the top and the bottom. Now I like to add just a little bit of salt and pepper, just to wake up the flavor a bit. Next we're going to take a couple slices of our ham. And feel free to break it up so that way it lays down a little bit better. This ham came compliments of Alton Brown's City Ham recipe, which is unbelievably good. And then next we're going to add our cheese. For this one I'm using provolone. You can use provolone, you can use jack, you can really use any kind of cheese that you like. Generally the whiter cheese tend to work better because they're a little bit sharper. And then finally, it wouldn't be a Cuban sandwich without at least a pickle or two. And smash it on top. Now, for those of us who don't have the luxury of a panini press, there's a way that you can do this without actually having to buy a panini press. Just get yourself 2 good pans. Make sure the bottom of one is super clean, and I mean super, super clean. You're going to take cooking spray, and you're going to spray the top and the bottom of your sandwich with cooking spray. Lay it down in the pan. We're going to put this on the stove for about 2 to 3 minutes on a good medium-high heat. Put the other pan on the heat as well for medium to high. Then we're going to take that pan off, put it on top of this one, and press it down for a good minute or 2. Keep an eye on it because this is going to toast pretty quickly. What we want at the end is for this to be nice and toasted and for the sandwich to be nice and compressed. And there you have it. Super easy, super delicious, and a great way to use up some of that leftover ham. Hope you guys have enjoyed this video. If you know someone else who loves a good Cuban sandwich or someone who has a really good recipe for a split pea soup, you want to hit the share button down below and send it to them, that'd be great. Join us next week as I have a special video for you guys of a great recipe for date night. If you'd like to get that in your playlist, just hit the subscribe button down below. Thanks everyone, and I'll see you next time.